The roar of Harley-Davidson engines shattered the evening calm of Stillwater, Arizona. Six motorcycles thundered down Main Street, their chrome parts catching the last golden rays of the setting sun. At the lead rode Jack the Ghost Reynolds, his weathered leather vest bearing the insignia of the Hell's Defenders MC. His silver-streaked hair flowed beneath a bandana, his face carved by years of hard living and harder choices. Ghost signaled to his brothers, and the formation of bikes slowed before the flickering neon sign of the Rusty Spoke Diner. The establishment stood as a relic from another era, its windows casting a warm yellow glow against the deepening twilight. He cut his engine, the sudden silence, almost as jarring as the noise that preceded it. Locals on the sidewalk quickened their pace, mothers pulling children closer, men averting their eyes while trying to appear unafraid. Ghost dismounted with the fluid grace that had earned him his road name years ago. He moved like a shadow, silent and purposeful, despite his imposing frame. The five men following him represented the old guard of the Hell's Defenders, each bearing the marks of lives lived outside society's boundaries. They were men who understood blood brotherhood and the code of the road concepts that had grown increasingly foreign to the modern world. "Dinner first, then we ride through to Phoenix," Ghost announced, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of too many cigarettes and roadside bars. "Been 15 years since I passed through this town." What nobody at the table knew was that Ghost had specifically chosen this route, this town, this diner. 15 years of wondering, of searching, had led him back to where it all began. He just never expected that fate would complete the circle tonight. Inside the Rusty Spoke, Sarah Mitchell wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency. At 25, she moved with the weary grace of someone who had been working too long for too little. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform slightly faded from countless washes. Despite the exhaustion lining her young face, her eyes remained alert, intelligent, assessing each customer as they entered. Sarah was working her second shift of the day. College textbooks on nursing peeked from her bag beneath the counter, dog-eared pages marking chapters she studied during breaks. 2 jobs and night classes left little time for anything else but the promise of a better future, of following in her mother's footsteps as a healthcare provider kept her going. The bell above the door jangled, and the ambient noise of the diner instantly died. Sarah looked up to see 6 men in leather cuts entering their presence, filling the small space with an almost palpable tension. The Hell's Defenders' patches on their backs might as well have been warning signs. A family with 2 young children immediately asked for their check. An elderly couple stared down at their meals, suddenly finding great interest in their meatloaf. The shift manager, Terry, backed away toward the kitchen, murmuring to the fry cook, "Call Mike if anything happens." Mike was the owner's son, an off-duty deputy who lived nearby. The bikers took the largest booth in the corner, their backs to the wall facing the entrance. Old habits died hard for men who had spent lifetimes watching for threats. Ghost took the seat with the clearest view of the door. Sarah noticed that none of the other waitresses made a move toward the table. Terry was suddenly very busy with the register. The other server, Denise, a middle-aged woman who'd worked there for decades, shook her head subtly when Sarah glanced her way. "Someone has to serve them," Sarah said quietly, gathering menus. "Your funeral," Denise whispered. "Those aren't weekend warriors playing dress-up. Those are real one-percenters." Sarah squared her shoulders. "My mother's been a nurse for 17 years. She taught me that people deserve respect regardless of appearances." She didn't add that her mother had also taught her to be cautious around men with dangerous reputations. Some lessons were better kept private. As Sarah approached the table, memories flickered through her mind. She was 10 years old again, accompanying her mother to the hospital on a take-your-daughter-to-work day. A biker had been brought in after a crash, his arms covered in tattoos, his face a mask of pain. While other hospital staff had kept their distance beyond professional necessity, her mother, Catherine, had shown the man genuine compassion, talking to him like a human being rather than a stereotype. The man had noticed young Sarah's fearful glances and had smiled through his pain. "Your mom's an angel, kid," he'd said. "Don't judge a book by its cover. Some of us ugly books have pretty decent stories inside." That lesson had stuck with her through the years, through the sideways glances from teachers who learned she had no father, through the whispers of neighbors who wondered about her mother's past, through the judgment of a small town that never quite accepted the single mother and her daughter who had appeared one day without explanation. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Rusty Spoke." Sarah greeted the bikers, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Can I start you with some drinks? 5 pairs of eyes assessed her with varying degrees of suspicion and interest. But it was the sixth man, the one they called Ghost, whose gaze seemed to penetrate deeper, as if he could read her entire life story in the lines of her face. Coffee? Black. For the table, Ghost said, finally, his eyes never leaving her. There was something in his expression, not recognition exactly, but a kind of disturbed awareness, as if something about Sarah had unsettled him. Coming right up, Sarah replied, turning to fetch a coffee pot and mugs. When she returned, the table had fallen silent. She felt their eyes on her as she poured 6 mugs of steaming coffee. The sleeve of Ghost's leather cut had ridden up slightly as he reached for his mug, revealing part of a tattoo on his forearm. Sarah nearly spilled the coffee when she caught sight of it. A black rose wrapped around a broken chain. Her hands trembled slightly, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of the mug. The tattoo was identical to the one her mother had hidden on her own forearm, a mark Catherine Mitchell had refused to explain, despite Sarah's repeated questions throughout her childhood. You okay, miss? Ghost asked, his gravelly voice dropping lower, almost gentle. Sarah's eyes snapped up to meet his, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had seen that tattoo every day of her life, had traced its outline with curious fingers, as a child had watched her mother absently rub it during moments of quiet contemplation or sadness. It was no random coincidence, no generic biker ink. It was too specific, too identical. Yes, I'm fine, Sarah managed finding her voice. It's just your tattoo. Ghost's expression hardened. His brothers at the table exchanged glances, subtle shifts in posture, signaling heightened alertness. What about it? There was an edge to his voice now, a challenge, wrapped in those 3 simple words. On the surface, he was asking about his tattoo, but the undercurrent carried a warning. You're stepping into dangerous territory. Sarah knew she should back away, should simply take their order and maintain the professional distance that kept waitresses safe from trouble. But 17 years of questions, of wondering about the father she'd never known, of watching her mother stare off into the distance on quiet nights, pushed her forward. My mother has the exact same tattoo, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In the same place, Brian, The diner fell completely silent. Even the sizzle of the grill in the kitchen seemed to pause. Ghost went perfectly still, the coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips. For a moment, he looked like he'd been turned to stone. Your mother, he said finally, each word measured and controlled. What's her name? Sarah hesitated, suddenly aware that she might be crossing a line her mother had drawn for good reasons. But she was 25 years old, no longer a child to be protected from the truth. Catherine Mitchell. The coffee mug slipped from Ghost's fingers, crashing onto the table and spilling dark liquid across the surface. No one moved to clean it up. Ghost stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound like a scream in the silence. Catherine, he repeated the name, emerging like a prayer from a man who'd forgotten how to worship. The hardness in his eyes gave way to something raw and vulnerable. For a moment, he looked like he might fall. One of his brothers, a heavy-set man with a gray beard, placed a steadying hand on Ghost's arm. Jack. What is it? Ghost ignored him. His eyes locked on Sarah's face, studying her features with desperate intensity. How old are you? He demanded. 25. Sarah answered, her voice stronger now, suspicion blooming into certainty. Ghost braced himself against the table. Born in February 12th. Sarah took a step back, her pulse thundering in her ears. How did you know that? The diner had become a vacuum, every person frozen in place, witnessing a private earthquake. Ghost's companions looked between him and Sarah with dawning comprehension. Jesus Christ, muttered the bearded biker. Ghost straightened, visibly pulling himself together, though his hands trembled slightly. We need to talk, he said to Sarah, his voice thick with emotion. Privately. Sarah glanced toward Terry, who was watching the scene with alarm, one hand hovering near the phone. My shift ends in 20 minutes, she said. There's a park across the street. Ghost nodded, settling heavily back into his chair. We'll wait. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. Sarah moved through her duties mechanically, taking orders, delivering food, processing payments. But her mind was elsewhere, spinning through implications and possibilities. The other bikers ate quickly, speaking in hushed tones, occasionally glancing her way. Ghost barely touched his food, his eyes following Sarah as she moved through the diner. When her relief arrived, Sarah untied her apron with shaking hands. She retrieved her jacket and bag from the break room, ignoring Denise's concerned questions and Terry's warnings to be careful. The night air felt cool against her flushed skin as she stepped outside. Ghost was waiting by a bench beneath an old oak tree alone. His brothers remained with their bikes in the diner parking lot, keeping a respectful distance. "They know to give us space," Ghost explained, noting her glance toward the others. Sarah sat on the bench, leaving enough room between them to feel safe. The park was well lit and passing cars on Main Street provided additional security. Ghost made no move to come closer, seeming to understand her caution. "Your mother never told you about me," he said. It wasn't a question. "She never told me anything about my father," Sarah confirmed. "Just that he wasn't in the picture. I stopped asking eventually." Ghost nodded slowly, his weathered face illuminated by the nearby streetlight. Up close, Sarah could see the map of his life, etched into his features. Deep lines around his eyes, a scar bisecting one eyebrow, the slight crookedness of a nose broken more than once. "Catherine and I were together for 3 years," he began, his voice low and rough. "Back then I was Jack Reynolds. The ghost came later. We were young, crazy in love. She was studying to be a nurse. I was fresh out of the Marines trying to figure out civilian life." He looked down at his hands, large and calloused. "Found brotherhood with the Hell's Defenders. It gave me purpose, structure. Things were good for a while. Then I started making bad choices. The club was changing, some of the brothers getting into things. Illegal things. I went along with it." Sarah listened silently, trying to reconcile this stranger with the phantom father she'd imagined throughout her childhood. "Catherine begged me to leave that life behind. We fought about it. The last time I saw her, she said she couldn't watch me destroy myself." Ghost's voice caught Kun. "I told her if she couldn't accept my life, my brothers, then she should go. I was too proud, too stupid, to see what I was throwing away." He looked up at the stars visible, even through the small town's light pollution. "I went to prison for 5 years on weapons charges. When I got out, I tried to find her to apologize. But she was gone. No forwarding address, no mutual friends who knew where she went. It was like she'd vanished." Sarah felt an unexpected surge of anger. "She was pregnant with me. She left to protect me from that life." Ghost's eyes filled with pain. "I never knew. Sarah, you have to believe me. I never knew Catherine was pregnant. If I had, would it have changed anything?" Sarah challenged. "Would you have left your precious club?" The question hung between them like a blade. Ghost seemed to age another decade before her eyes. "I want to say yes," he admitted finally. "I want to tell you I would have been the man you needed, the man Catherine deserved. But back then," he shook his head, "I was lost, selfish. It took losing everything to start finding my way back." There was raw honesty in his voice, an absence of excuses that Sarah hadn't expected. She'd prepared for denials, for blame, for the kind of selfish justifications her friends' deadbeat fathers had offered over the years. "There are mistakes a man carries his whole life," Ghost said quietly. "Not knowing about you not being there for you, that's the biggest mistake of mine." A car passed by its headlights, briefly illuminating them. In that flash, Sarah saw something in Ghost's leather cut that she hadn't noticed before. Beneath the Hell's Defenders patch, partially hidden, was a small silver cross pinned to the leather. Ghost noticed her gaze. "Found faith in prison," he explained simply. "Not enough to save me from all my demons, but enough to keep trying." Sarah wasn't sure what to feel. Anger, curiosity, grief for what might have been, all swirled together in a confusing tempest. "Why are you here now, after all these years?" "Truth," Ghost asked, meeting her eyes directly. "I never stopped looking. Every town I rode through, I checked phone books, asked around. The internet made it easier, but Catherine covered her tracks well. I don't blame her." He reached inside his cut and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded photograph. "This is all I had left." Sarah took it cautiously. The photo showed a much younger Catherine, her hair longer, her smile carefree in a way Sarah had rarely seen. She was sitting on the back of a motorcycle, arms wrapped around a young man who bore little resemblance to the hardened biker beside her now. They looked happy limitlessly, so the way only the young and truly in love can look. "Mom never smiles like this anymore," Sarah said softly, passing the photo back. "That's on me." Ghost acknowledged, gently returning the picture to his wallet. I broke something beautiful because I was too blind to see its value. Sarah studied his face, looking for herself in his features. She had her mother's coloring, but now she could see her own eyes mirrored in his, the same shape, the same direct gaze. The strong line of her jaw, always different from her mother's softer features, made sense now. "Does she know you're here?" Ghost asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, she works nights at Pinecrest Nursing Home. She's been there for years." Ghost absorbed this information, his expression unreadable. "I'd like to see her, but that's her choice. I won't force my way back into her life, into your life either." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Whatever this man had been, whatever crimes or mistakes marked his past, there was genuine regret etched into every line of his face. "I need time to process this," Sarah said finally. "And I need to talk to my mom." Ghost nodded, reaching into his pocket and producing a business card. It was simple, bearing only a name, Jack Reynolds, and a phone number. No Hell's Defenders logo, no mention of Ghost. "I'll be in Phoenix for a week," he said. "After that, I'll be heading back to Tucson. That's home base now. I'm not asking for anything, Sarah. Just a chance to explain to Catherine. And maybe, if you're willing, a chance to know my daughter." Sarah took the card, feeling the weight of it far beyond its physical presence. "I can't promise anything." "I don't deserve promises," Ghost replied. "Just consideration." The rumble of a motorcycle engine cut through their conversation. One of Ghost's brothers was approaching, slowly, his expression concerned. Behind him, still at the diner, another biker was pointing down the street, his posture tense. Ghost stood immediately, his body language is shifting from vulnerable to alert in an instant. "Viper," he muttered, scanning the street. "What is it?" Sarah asked, rising as well. "Trouble," Ghost answered tersely. "Sarah, go back inside the diner, now." Before she could respond, 3 motorcycles rounded the corner, their riders wearing cuts emblazoned with a different patch, Hell's Rage MC. They slowed as they passed the diner, the lead rider's head turning to take in the parked Hell's Defenders bikes. Ghost's companion reached them, keeping his voice low. "Viper's with them. He saw our bikes." Ghost cursed under his breath. "Get the others. We're leaving. I don't want trouble in this town." Sarah stood frozen, suddenly aware that the world her father inhabited was as dangerous as her mother had feared. "Who's Viper?" "Someone from my past," Ghost answered, his eyes still tracking the new arrivals. "Someone who'd love nothing more than to settle old scores." He turned to Sarah, urgency in his voice. "Go inside, please. I don't want you anywhere near this." The 3 Hell's Rage bikes had circled back and were now idling across the street. The lead rider, an older man with a shaved head and a beard streaked with gray, stared directly at them. "Well, well," the man called out, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Jack the Ghost Reynolds. Didn't expect to find you in this backwater." Ghost positioned himself slightly in front of Sarah. "Not looking for trouble, Viper. Just passing through." Viper smirked, shutting off his engine and dismounting. "Funny how trouble seems to find you anyway." His eyes shifted to Sarah, his expression calculating. "Making friends with the locals." "She's nobody to you," Ghost replied, his voice hardening. "We're leaving. There's no percentage in starting something here." Viper took a step forward, his hand resting casually near his waist. "Maybe I just want to catch up with an old friend. Heard some interesting rumors about you lately. Something about talking to the feds." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ghost's brother tensed, ready for whatever might come next. "Go back to your bikes," Ghost said evenly. "We've got no quarrel tonight." Sarah felt the tension escalating, the invisible currents of old hatreds and tribal loyalties swirling around her. This was the world her mother had fled, the danger she had protected her daughter from for 25 years. Viper's gaze shifted back to Sarah, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Pretty girl. Reminds me of someone. Can't quite place it." Ghost went completely still. Sarah could sense the change in him, like a switch being flipped. Whatever peace he had found, whatever redemption he sought, there was still a dangerous man beneath the surface. "Last warning," Ghost said, his voice deadly quiet. "Walk away." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Then from the diner, the remaining Hell's Defenders emerged as one, moving with purposeful solidarity toward their brothers. The odds shifted visibly. Viper assessed the situation, his smile never faltering. "Another time, Ghost. We've got plenty of road ahead of us." He turned back to his bike, then paused. By the way, that tattoo on your arm, black rose and broken chain, saw one just like it recently. Funny coincidence. Ghost went rigid. Where? Some nurse at a hospital in Phoenix, treating one of my brothers after a crash. Viper's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. Small world, isn't it, Catherine, I think her name was. Sarah felt ice spread through her veins. Her mother occasionally picked up shifts at hospitals in Phoenix for extra money. Viper was lying about the timeline, but the threat was unmistakable. He knew who Catherine was. Ghost took a step toward Viper, but his brother caught his arm, murmuring something urgent in his ear. After a tense moment, Ghost nodded stiffly. Viper mounted his bike with a satisfied smirk. See you around, Ghost. His gaze flicked to Sarah one last time. Nice meeting you, whoever you are. The three Hell's Rage bikes roared to life and accelerated down the street, leaving a wake of tension behind them. Ghost turned to Sarah, his expression grim. You need to take me to your mother, now. Viper's not making idle threats. Sarah stared after the retreating motorcycles, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. In the space of an hour, her life had transformed from the predictable struggles of work and school to something out of a crime drama. The father she'd never known had materialized only to bring danger to her doorstep. My car's in the back lot, she said, finally making a decision. I'll take you to Mom, but I'm not promising anything beyond that. Ghost nodded, understanding the conditional nature of her offer. Thank you. He turned to his brothers, giving swift, quiet instructions. They would follow at a distance, he explained to Sarah, providing security without crowding them. As they walked toward her car, Sarah felt as though she were balancing on the edge of a precipice. Behind her lay the safe if difficult life she had always known. Ahead stretched an unknown landscape filled with complicated emotions and potential dangers. She might not want to see you, Sarah warned as they reached her aging Honda. She might tell you to leave and never come back. Ghost nodded, his expression solemn. That's her right, but she needs to know about Viper. Whatever happens between us, her safety comes first. There was something in his voice, a protective certainty that resonated deep within Sarah. Whatever else Jack the Ghost Reynolds might be in this moment, he was a man determined to protect what he once loved, what he had lost through his own failings. As they pulled away from the Rusty Spoke diner, Sarah glimpsed her reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in her life, she saw not just her mother's daughter, but also her father's child. The revelation was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The road to Pinecrest Nursing Home stretched before them, carrying Sarah toward a collision of past and present that would forever alter the course of three lives bound by blood, separated by choices, and now reunited by fate and the simple, indelible mark of a black rose wrapped around a broken chain. The Pinecrest Nursing Home stood like a sentinel against the night sky, its windows glowing softly in the darkness. Sarah parked her Honda in the staff lot, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. The drive had passed in near silence, Ghost respecting her need to process the seismic shift in her reality. Behind them, two Hell's Defenders motorcycles pulled into distant parking spaces, maintaining their protective vigil. Mom works on the East Wing, Sarah said, breaking the silence. With the long-term care residents, she might not be able to take a break right away. Ghost nodded, his face half illuminated by the dashboard lights. I can wait. Been waiting 17 years. A few more minutes won't make a difference. But they both knew that wasn't true. Every minute now carried weight laden with the threat Viper had so casually delivered. Time, once an endless road stretching before them, had suddenly become a finite resource. There's someone you should meet first, Sarah said as they exited the car. Frank Davis. He's Mom's favorite resident. Former Korean War vet. She tells him everything. A flash of understanding crossed Ghost's weathered features. You're testing me. Sarah didn't deny it. Frank can spot a fraud from a mile away if you're playing some kind of game. I'm not, Ghost said, simply, no defensiveness in his tone. Lead the way. The nursing home smelled of antiseptic and potpourri, an artificial freshness masking the underlying scent of age and decline. The night shift moved with quiet efficiency through the corridors, nodding to Sarah as a familiar face. No one questioned Ghost's presence, his imposing figure somehow less threatening in this space dedicated to care and healing. Room 107 had a small American flag taped beside the doorframe. Sarah knocked gently before entering, Ghost hanging back in the hallway at her gesture. Frank Davis sat in a wheelchair by the window, his thin frame draped in a Veterans Association blanket. At 80, his body had betrayed him, but his eyes remained sharp as steel, taking in Sarah, and then the shadowy figure behind her. "Two visitors in one night must be my lucky day," Frank said, his voice stronger than his appearance suggested. "Catherine just left to check on Mr. Simmons," said the old coots, giving the new nurse trouble again. Sarah moved to Frank's side, taking his gnarled hand in hers. "Frank, I need to ask you something important. Mom ever mentioned someone named Jack to you, Jack Reynolds?" The change in Frank's expression was subtle but unmistakable. His eyes narrowed, darting to the doorway where Ghost's silhouette was visible. "That him?" Frank asked, his voice dropping. Sarah nodded. "Let him in," Frank said. "Let me see the man who broke our Catherine's heart." Ghost stepped into the room, removing his bandana in a gesture of respect. In the soft light, without the backdrop of his motorcycle and brothers, he looked both more human and more formidable. The contradictions that defined him were laid bare: strength and vulnerability, danger and honor, regret and resolve. Frank assessed him with the unflinching gaze of a man who had seen the worst humanity had to offer on distant battlefields and found a way to live with those memories. "Hell's Defenders," Frank noted, eyeing the patch on Ghost's cut. "Catherine told me about your club. Never mentioned the man, just the organization." "The man didn't deserve mentioning," Ghost replied, holding Frank's gaze. "I failed her." Frank's weathered face remained impassive. "Why are you here now?" "I found Sarah by accident, stopped at the diner where she works." "And the tattoo," Sarah added. "I recognized his tattoo." Frank nodded slowly. "The black rose. Catherine thinks I don't know about it, always keeps it covered. But old eyes still see things, especially things people try to hide." He pointed a trembling finger at Ghost. "You know what that ink means to her? Every time she looks at it, she remembers. Every single day for 17 years. Ghost absorbed the rebuke without flinching. "I never stopped looking for her, never stopped trying to make things right." "Words," Frank dismissed. "Easy things words." "Actions then," Ghost countered. 5 years in Lompoc Federal, 4 more years clean and sober, 3 years working with veterans outreach programs, 2 years helping young men stay out of gangs, 1 year as a confidential informant for the FBI to bring down a weapons trafficking ring." Frank's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Interesting resume for a Hell's Defender." "I'm not the man I was," Ghost said. "Never will be the man I should have been, but I'm trying." The old veteran studied Ghost with the careful assessment of someone who had spent a lifetime judging character under pressure. "Why tonight? Why the sudden urgency?" Sarah interjected, explaining the encounter with Viper. Frank's face darkened as she described the veiled threat. "Catherine's in danger," Ghost concluded. "Whether she wants to see me or not, she needs to know." Frank was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping against the arm of his wheelchair. Finally, he spoke, addressing Sarah. "Your mother carries burdens she never talks about. The life before you, the reasons she ran. She built walls to protect you both." His gaze shifted to Ghost. "But walls keep things in as well as out. The past doesn't stay buried forever." He reached for a call button attached to his blanket. "I'll have them page her. But I'm warning you, Reynolds. Catherine Mitchell is the daughter I never had. You hurt her again, wheelchair or not, I'll find a way to make you regret it." The threat from an elderly man in a wheelchair might have seemed absurd, but Ghost nodded with genuine respect. "Understood." While they waited, Frank extracted more of Ghost's story, asking pointed questions about his time in prison, his work with the FBI, his current standing with the Hell's Defenders. Ghost answered without hesitation or embellishment, laying bare the complicated path that had led him to this room. "Club knows about your FBI work?" Frank asked. Ghost nodded. "The president and vice president. They've been steering the club back toward its roots, veterans helping veterans, legal businesses, community outreach. The old days of gun running and drug deals are over, at least for our chapter." "Not for Viper's crew," Frank noted. "No," Ghost agreed. "Hell's Rage broke off from our mother chapter 5 years ago. They've gone the other direction, deeper into criminal enterprise." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Ghost tensed his hand, instinctively moving toward his waistband before stopping himself. Sarah rose from her seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. Catherine Mitchell appeared in the doorway, her nurse's scrubs crisp despite the late hour, her blonde hair now streaked with silver pulled back in a practical bun. At 45, she remained beautiful, the years having added character rather than simply age to her features. "Frank, you paged is everything?" The words died on her lips as she saw Ghost standing in the corner of the room. The clipboard she was holding slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. "Hello, Catherine," Ghost said, his voice barely above a whisper. Catherine's face drained of color. For a moment, Sarah feared her mother might faint. Instead, Catherine gripped the door frame, her knuckles turning white. "Jack," she breathed, the name emerging like a ghost of its own. Her eyes darted to Sarah, comprehension and fear dawning simultaneously. "What have you done?" "Mom, I can explain," Sarah began. Catherine cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Not here." She glanced down the hallway, then back at Ghost. "Staff break room, 5 minutes." With that, she retrieved her clipboard and walked away, her back rigidly straight. Frank exchanged looks with Sarah. That went better than expected. She didn't scream or throw anything. "Yet," Ghost added grimly. 5 minutes later, Ghost stood alone in the small staff break room. Catherine entered, closing the door firmly behind her. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, 17 years of separation, stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. "You found her," Catherine said finally, her voice controlled despite the emotion in her eyes. "How accident," Ghost replied. "Stopped at the diner. She saw my tattoo." Catherine's hand unconsciously moved to her own forearm, where beneath the long sleeve of her scrubs lay the matching ink. Of all the diners in all the towns, fate has a twisted sense of humor, Ghost agreed. "She has your smile, your kindness." "She has your eyes," Catherine countered, "your stubborn determination." A brief, unwilling smile touched her lips before vanishing. "Why now, Jack?" "Why, after all these years," Ghost explained about Viper, about the veiled threat. Catherine listened, her professional composure slipping to reveal genuine fear. "He mentioned me by name. He knows I'm here." Ghost nodded. "Viper never makes empty threats, Catherine. You know that." She turned away, moving to the small window that overlooked the parking lot. "I spent 17 years building a safe life for Sarah. 17 years looking over my shoulder, moving when necessary, changing jobs, when anyone asked too many questions about my past." Her voice hardened. "And in one night, you bring it all crashing down." The accusation hit Ghost like a physical blow. "I never stopped looking for you." "Never. When I got out of Lompoc, you were gone. No forwarding address, no mutual friends who knew anything." "That was the point," Catherine said, turning back to face him. "You chose the club over us, over your own child." "I didn't know about Sarah," Ghost said, the pain evident in his voice. "You never told me you were pregnant." Catherine's eyes flashed. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have walked away from the Hell's Defenders, from the guns, from the life that was slowly destroying you?" The same question Sarah had asked. Ghost had no better answer now than he'd had then. "I want to say yes," he admitted. "But back then, I was lost, Catherine. Too blind to see what really mattered." Catherine studied him, really seeing him for the first time. The silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the cross pinned to his cut. "You've changed." It wasn't a question, but Ghost answered anyway. "Tried to, every day. Some changes stick, some don't. The anger's still there, the darkness, but I fight it now." Catherine moved to the small table in the center of the room, sinking into a chair. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. When Ghost complied, she continued, "Tell me everything. From the beginning. From the day I left." Ghost started talking. He described his spiral after she left, the increasingly dangerous jobs he took for the club, the arrest that finally landed him in federal prison. He spoke of the desolation of his cell, of finding an unexpected mentor in a prison chaplain, of the grueling work of confronting his demons. Catherine listened without interruption, her face giving away nothing. When Ghost described his work as an informant, the dangerous dance of betraying criminal elements while maintaining his cover in the club, something flickered in her expression. "You could have been killed," she said. "If they discovered you were informing." Ghost shrugged. "Wouldn't have been a great loss back then." "And now," Catherine challenged, "now I have something to live for," Ghost said simply. "A chance to know my daughter. A chance to make amends to you." Catherine's composure cracked slightly. 17 years, Jack. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect— I don't expect anything, Ghost interrupted gently. Not forgiveness, not a place in your life. But Sarah deserves to know her father if she wants to, and you both deserve to be safe from Viper. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then to Ghost's surprise, she rolled up her sleeve, revealing the black rose tattoo. The image was identical to his own, though the colors had faded slightly with time. I should have had this removed years ago, she said softly. Every time I looked at it, I remembered everything, the good and the bad. Her fingers traced the outline of the broken chain. Our symbol of freedom. Remember breaking the chains that bound us to expect less from life. Ghost nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Freedom became a different kind of prison for both of us. Catherine rolled her sleeve back down. What happens now? With Viper. The FBI has been building a case against Hell's Rage for months. Weapons trafficking, extortion, drug distribution. My testimony is part of that case. Understanding dawned in Catherine's eyes. That's why he's threatening us. He knows you're informing. Ghost nodded. They've been watching him, but they don't have enough yet for an arrest, not one that would stick. Catherine stood abruptly, pacing the small room. So we're what bait leverage to keep you in line until they have their case. No, Ghost said firmly. I won't let that happen. I'm going to Agent Harrison tomorrow, telling him the situation changed. They can find another way to nail Viper. Catherine stopped pacing. And your deal? Your immunity? Ghost met her gaze steadily. Some things matter more. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, a bridge spanning 17 years of absence. Catherine's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You really have changed, she said quietly. Before Ghost could respond, the door to the break room opened. Sarah stood there, her face tense with worry. Everything okay? She asked, looking between them. Catherine nodded, professional calm, settling over her features once more. We're talking, Sarah, about the situation. Sarah entered the room, fully closing the door behind her. And about me, about why you never told me about my father. The direct question landed like a stone in the still water ripples of unspoken history expanding outward. Catherine flinched, but to her credit, she met her daughter's challenging gaze. To protect you, she said simply. The life your father was living. It wasn't safe for a child, for anyone. I deserve to know, Sarah insisted, even the ugly truth. Ghost intervened, his voice gentle but firm. Your mother made the right choice, Sarah. The man I was then, he wouldn't have been a father worth knowing. Sarah turned to him, frustration evident in her posture. But that should have been my decision to make. Both of you decided for me. Catherine reached for her daughter's hand. You're right. I thought I was protecting you, but I was also protecting myself. From questions I didn't want to answer, from a past I was trying to forget. She glanced at Ghost. From the pain of loving someone who couldn't choose me, choose us above everything else. The raw honesty silenced Sarah's protests. She looked between her parents, these two strangers who had created her, whose choices had shaped her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. So what happens now? She asked finally. With this Viper person, Ghost explained the situation again, outlining the threat more explicitly now that Catherine was present. As he spoke, a plan began to form, a way to protect them while still bringing Viper to justice. Agent Harrison needs to know about this threat, Ghost concluded. He can arrange protection for both of you. Catherine shook her head. We can't just abandon our lives. I have responsibilities here. Sarah has her studies, her job. Your safety comes first, Ghost insisted. And what about you? Sarah asked. If you back out of testifying, what happens to you? Ghost's silence was answer enough. No, Catherine said firmly. I won't have you sacrificing yourself for us. There must be another way. Their discussion was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Frank's night nurse poked her head in. Catherine's sorry to interrupt, but Frank's asking for all of you. Says it's important. They found Frank still by the window in his room, but his posture had changed. He was alert, tension evident in his frail frame. 3 motorcycles just pulled into the lot, he reported. Same patches as you described, Sarah. Hell's Rage. Ghost moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight while assessing the situation. Viper, he confirmed grimly. And 2 of his lieutenants. He pulled out his phone, sending a quick text message. My brothers are still outside. They'll keep Viper's crew busy. But how did they find us? Sarah asked, fear creeping into her voice. Ghost's expression darkened. They must have followed us from the diner. Catherine's professional calm gave way to maternal protectiveness. We need to get Sarah out of here. Ghost nodded in agreement. Back entrance. Through the kitchen, down the service corridor, Catherine confirmed. I'll take her. No, Ghost countered. You stay with your patients. I'll get her to safety. Catherine hesitated, torn between trust and 17 years of protective instinct. Frank's voice broke the impasse. Trust him, Catherine, the old veteran said. I've spent a lifetime reading men. He'll die before he lets anything happen to her. Catherine's eyes met Ghost, searching for something she'd lost faith in long ago. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she nodded slowly. My car keys are in my locker, she said to Ghost. Take them. The address to our house is on the keychain. Go out the back way, through the kitchen. There's a service road that connects to Maple Street. She turned to Sarah, gripping her shoulders. Go with your father. Do exactly what he says. The word father sent a visible shock through all three of them, an acknowledgement of a truth that could no longer be denied or avoided. Sarah hugged her mother tightly. What about you? I'll be fine, Catherine assured her. I'm just a nurse to them. They have no reason to hurt me. Ghost wasn't convinced. Catherine, go, she insisted. I'll call the police as soon as you're clear. Ghost knew she was right. Their priority had to be getting Sarah to safety. He reached into his cut and pulled out a small object, pressing it into Catherine's hand. Take this, he said softly, just in case. Catherine looked down at a small canister of pepper spray, military grade. Her eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. Like old times, she murmured. Better aim this time, Ghost replied with the ghost of a smile. Last time you used it, you got us both. The brief moment of shared history, of intimate memory, created a connection that transcended the years between them. Be careful, Catherine said, the words laden with more emotion than she'd allowed herself to show. Ghost nodded, turning to Sarah. Stay close. Move fast. Don't look back. As they slipped out of Frank's room, Catherine moved to the window, watching the parking lot with growing apprehension. Frank's hand found hers, offering silent support. He's a changed man, Frank observed. Not completely. The darkness is still there, but he's fighting it now. Catherine squeezed his hand. It might be too late, Frank. The old veteran shook his head. It's never too late to find your way home. Outside in the parking lot, Viper dismounted from his motorcycle, scanning the building with predatory patience. He was a man accustomed to hunting, to waiting for his prey to make a mistake. Tonight, he had finally cornered the ghost who had haunted him for years, the man whose testimony could destroy everything he'd built. Inside, Ghost led Sarah through the labyrinthine corridors of the nursing home service areas. They moved silently, Ghost's years of evading law enforcement serving them well now. At each intersection, he paused, listening before signaling Sarah to continue. You've done this before, Sarah observed as they reached the kitchen. More times than I care to remember, Ghost admitted. Different circumstances, though. Usually running from the law, not toward it. The kitchen was empty at this late hour, the industrial appliances looming like sleeping giants in the dim light. They moved between stainless steel counters toward the rear exit, Ghost, checking his phone periodically for updates from his brothers outside. They've got Viper and one of his guys talking at the front entrance, Ghost reported. Security isn't letting them in without visitor passes. And the third guy, Sarah asked. Ghost's expression turned grim. No sign of him. He could be watching the back exit. Sarah felt fear bubble up in her throat. What do we do? Ghost considered their options, his mind working through scenarios with practiced efficiency. Change of plan. We stay put, find a secure location within the building. Let my brothers deal with Viper outside. But Mom said, your mother expects me to keep you safe, Ghost interrupted gently. That's what I'm going to do, even if it means not following her exact instructions. The certainty in his voice was reassuring. Despite everything, despite the danger that his presence had brought into her life, Sarah found herself trusting this stranger who was her father. There was something solid about him, immovable in his determination to protect what was his. They found a storage room off the main kitchen, filled with dry goods and non-perishable supplies. Ghost positioned himself near the door, checking his phone again. My VP says Viper's getting agitated. Security called the police. Is that good or bad? Sarah asked. Depends, Ghost replied. If Viper leaves before the cops arrive, good. If he decides to force his way in to find us, very bad. Sarah huddled against a shelf of canned goods, trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, her biggest concerns had been her nursing school exams and making rent on time. Now she was hiding in a storage closet with a father she'd never known, running from bikers who wanted to kill him. Why does he hate you so much? She asked, needing to understand. This Viper guy. Ghost was silent for a moment, weighing his answer. We were brothers once, in the club. I trusted him. He betrayed that trust, set me up to take a fall for a weapons deal gone bad. That's what sent me to Lompoc. And now you're returning the favor, Sarah observed, testifying against him. Ghost's expression hardened. The difference is I'm telling the truth. He's selling guns to street gangs, Sarah. Kids are dying because of the weapons he puts on the street. The conviction in his voice surprised her. This wasn't just about revenge or even justice. There was a moral certainty to his actions that didn't align with the criminal image she'd constructed of him over the years. How did you end up like this? She asked softly. Mom never said anything about your background, just that you were dangerous. Ghost leaned against the wall, his eyes distant with memory. I was a good Marine. 3 tours. Came home with medals and nightmares. Couldn't adjust to civilian life. The structure was gone, the brotherhood, the purpose. His voice dropped lower. The Hell's Defenders gave me all that back. Veterans, helping veterans, that was the original mission. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. And now, Sarah prompted, now I'm trying to remember who I was before all of this. The man your mother fell in love with. He was a better man than the one I became. The simple admission, devoid of excuses or self-pity, touched something in Sarah. She was beginning to see glimpses of the person beneath the leather and patches, the human being her mother had once loved enough to create a child with. Ghost's phone vibrated. He checked it, relief flooding his features. Police arrived. Viper and his crew are leaving. Sarah exhaled shakily. So we're safe. For now, Ghost qualified. But this isn't over. Viper doesn't give up easily. They waited another 15 minutes before cautiously emerging from the storage room. Ghost led the way back toward the main part of the facility, constantly alert for any sign of danger. They found Catherine at the nurse's station, her professional composure firmly in place despite the tension evident in her posture. The police are still here, she informed them. They want to speak with all of us. Ghost tensed visibly. Sarah should talk to them. You too. I need to stay out of it. Catherine understood immediately. Your FBI arrangement. Ghost nodded. If my involvement with law enforcement becomes public knowledge before the case is solid, everything falls apart. Catherine made a quick decision. Use my office. Down the hall, 3rd door on the right. Lock yourself in until we're done with the police. As Ghost slipped away, Sarah watched her mother transform from the frightened woman of minutes ago into the calm, competent professional she'd always known. Catherine addressed the approaching police officers with confidence, explaining that her daughter had been visiting when they noticed suspicious individuals in the parking lot. My daughter thought she recognized one of them from a domestic disturbance case at the diner where she worked, Catherine explained smoothly. We were concerned, so we called security. The officers took their statements, jotting notes and radioing descriptions of the Hell's Rage members. Sarah followed her mother's lead, careful to keep Ghost out of the narrative. By the time they finished, Viper and his crew were long gone, with police promising additional patrols around the facility for the remainder of the night. When the officers finally left, Catherine led Sarah to her small office. Ghost was standing by the window, watching the police cruisers leave the parking lot. Clear, Catherine announced as she closed the door behind them. For now. Ghost turned to face them, his expression grave. This was just the beginning. Viper knows I'm here, now knows about both of you. He won't stop. What are our options? Catherine asked pragmatically, the nurse accustomed to triaging emergencies. I contact Agent Harrison in the morning, arrange for protective custody for both of you until the case against Viper is solid. Catherine shook her head. That could take months. We can't put our lives on hold indefinitely. The alternative is worse, Ghost countered. Sarah watched her parents fall into a familiar pattern, the back and forth of 2 strong-willed individuals who had clearly done this dance before. Despite the years of separation, they still knew how to push each other's buttons, how to challenge each other's positions. There has to be another way, Sarah interjected, One that doesn't involve us hiding or you sacrificing yourself. Ghost and Catherine both turned to her, momentarily united in their surprise at her intervention. What if, Sarah began thinking aloud, what if we set a trap? Use their knowledge of our connection to lure Viper into making a mistake. Ghost's expression darkened. Absolutely not. I won't put either of you at risk. But we're already at risk, Sarah pointed out. At least this way we have some control over the situation. Catherine studied her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. She has your strategic mind, she said to Ghost, always looking for the angle, the leverage point. Ghost wasn't amused. And your stubborn determination. But this isn't a debate, Sarah. Viper is dangerous, more dangerous than you can possibly understand. Then help me understand, Sarah challenged. Stop protecting me from the truth and treat me like an adult who deserves to know what's happening. The demand hung in the air between them, echoing the earlier confrontation about her right to know her own history. Ghost and Catherine exchanged looks, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared history and mutual respect, despite everything that had come between them. She's right, Catherine said finally. She deserves the whole truth. About everything. Ghost exhaled heavily, resignation mixing with a grudging respect for his daughter's courage. All right, but not here. Somewhere secure. Catherine made another quick decision. Our house. We'll go together. The simple statement, our house, carried weight far beyond the words themselves. It was an invitation, tentative and conditional, but an invitation nonetheless. Ghost recognized it for the significant gesture it was. My brothers will follow, maintain a perimeter, he said, already texting instructions. Extra eyes just in case. As they prepared to leave, Frank called Catherine to his room one last time. The old veteran had insisted on staying awake until he knew they were safe. Remember what I said, Frank told Catherine as she leaned down to hug him goodbye. It's never too late. Catherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'll remember. To Ghost, Frank extended a gnarled hand. Take care of them, Marine. That's an order. Ghost took the fragile hand in his own, careful of its strength. Yes, sir. As they left Pinecrest, Ghost riding in the back of Catherine's car, while Sarah drove, the three of them formed an uneasy triangle of connection. Behind them followed two Hell's Defenders motorcycles brothers, in arms protecting their own. Ahead lay a house that had never known a father's presence and a future suddenly uncertain in ways both terrifying and full of possibility. In the rearview mirror, Sarah caught Ghost's eye. Thank you, she said simply, for coming back, even if it took 17 years. Ghost held her gaze in the mirror, his eyes so like her own, filled with emotions too complex for words. I never left, he said quietly. Not in the ways that matter. In the passenger seat, Catherine stared straight ahead, but her hand moved unconsciously to her forearm, to the black rose hidden beneath her sleeve. Some marks could never be erased, some bonds never truly broken. Like the tattoo they shared, the connection between the three of them remained faded perhaps, but indelible. Catherine's house sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees, their branches creating lace-like shadows under the streetlights. It was a modest single-story home with a small, well-tended garden and a covered porch. Nothing about it suggested the extraordinary circumstances bringing its occupants together tonight. Ghost surveyed the property with a professional eye as they approached, noting sightlines, access points, potential vulnerabilities. The tactical assessment was automatic, ingrained by years of living in a world where threats could materialize without warning. Behind them, his brothers positioned themselves discreetly at opposite ends of the street, engines silenced watching. Nice place, Ghost remarked as Catherine unlocked the front door. The simple observation carried layers of meaning, acknowledgement of the life she'd built without him, appreciation for the home she'd created for their daughter. It's not much, Catherine replied, but it's ours. The interior reflected Catherine's practical nature and Sarah's youthful influence. Comfortable furniture, bookshelves overflowing with medical texts and paperback novels, framed photographs documenting Sarah's life, from infancy to adulthood. Ghost paused before these visual chapters of his daughter's history, Sarah in a kindergarten play, Sarah at high school graduation, Sarah in her first nursing scrubs. 17 years of moments he had missed, preserved behind glass. Coffee, Catherine offered, moving toward the kitchen with the practiced efficiency of someone seeking normalcy in an abnormal situation. Please, Ghost answered, still studying the photographs. Sarah disappeared briefly, returning with her laptop. I'm going to email my professors. No way I'm making my morning classes after all this. The domestic scene, Catherine in the kitchen, Burrow on the couch with her computer, created an illusion of ordinary family life that ached with what might have been. Ghost remains standing, too aware of his incongruity in this peaceful tableau, a leather-clad harbinger of chaos in a home built on stability and routine. Catherine returned with 3 mugs of coffee, setting them on the small dining table. "Sit," she instructed Ghost. "You're making me nervous, hovering like that." He complied, removing his cut and draping it over the back of the chair, revealing a faded black t-shirt beneath. Without the leather and patches, he looked suddenly more human, more vulnerable. The Hell's Defenders insignia that had defined so much of his identity lay across the chair like a shed skin. "Start from the beginning," Catherine said, taking her own seat. "Everything about Viper, about the FBI, about why he's coming after us now." Sarah closed her laptop and joined them, the three forming a triangle around the small table. Ghost wrapped his hands around the warm mug, gathering his thoughts. "6 months ago, the FBI approached me," he began. "They'd been building a case against Hell's Rage, specifically against Viper's weapons trafficking operation. They had evidence, but not enough for a solid conviction. They needed someone on the inside." "Why you?" Sarah asked. "History." Ghost answered simply. "I knew Viper better than most. Knew how he operated, who he dealt with, where the vulnerabilities in his organization might be." "And they offered you a deal," Catherine surmised. Ghost nodded. "Full immunity for past crimes in exchange for information and testimony that would bring down Hell's Rage." "What kind of past crimes?" Sarah asked, her directness reminiscent of her mother. Ghost met her gaze without flinching. "Weapons possession, assault, accessory to crimes I won't burden you with knowing." "So you agreed to inform on your brothers," Catherine stated, no judgment in her tone, only a need to understand. "Not exactly," Ghost corrected. "The Hell's Defenders? I joined the club I loved doesn't exist anymore. Not in Viper's chapter. What he's built with Hell's Rage is something else entirely, something that betrays everything the club was supposed to stand for." His voice hardened. "He's selling military-grade weapons to street gangs, Catherine. Kids are dying in turf wars fought with firepower meant for battlefields." The conviction in his voice resonated through the small kitchen. This wasn't just about settling old scores or saving his own skin. There was a moral imperative driving him that neither Catherine nor Sarah had anticipated. "So for 6 months, I've been feeding information to Agent Harrison, helping the FBI build their case. We're close, maybe 2 weeks away, from having enough for a federal indictment that would put Viper away for life. And now he suspects you," Catherine concluded. Ghost's expression darkened. "More than suspects. Tonight confirmed it for him. Why else would I be in Stillwater connecting with a woman and her adult daughter who just happened to share my tattoo?" "So what happens now?" Sarah asked, the reality of their danger settling over her like a physical weight. "Now I contact Harrison, tell him the situation's changed. We accelerate the timeline move on Viper before he can move on us." Catherine's nurse's instinct for practical solutions surfaced. "And in the meantime, Sarah and I just sit here waiting for Viper to find us." "No," Ghost said firmly. "You both go somewhere safe. I have friends, legitimate friends, not club, who can put you up until this is over." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "And you, what will you be doing while we're hiding?" Ghost's silence was answer enough. "No." Catherine said, her tone brooking no argument. "You are not offering yourself as bait." "It's the fastest way to end this," Ghost countered. "It's suicide," Catherine retorted. Sarah watched her parents, the dynamic between them both familiar and strange. Despite 17 years apart, they still knew each other's patterns, still anticipated each other's arguments. There was a foundation beneath their interaction that time had not completely eroded. "Maybe there's another way," Sarah suggested. "Something that doesn't require any of us to be bait or to go into hiding." Both turned to her, momentarily united in their attention. "The FBI already has a case, right?" Sarah continued. "They just need a little more time. What if we give them that time by making Viper think you've gone, that you got spooked and left town?" Ghost considered this. "It might buy us a day or two, but Viper isn't easily fooled. He'd have people watching, confirming." "So we make it convincing," Sarah insisted. "A public argument, you storming off on your bike, heading out of town with your brothers, in full view of anyone who might be watching." Catherine was following her daughter's logic. Meanwhile, he circles back, secretly stays hidden until the FBI is ready to move. Ghost looked between them, seeing the same determined intelligence in both faces. It might work, but it still leaves you two vulnerable if Viper decides to use you as leverage. Not if we're not here either, Catherine said, thinking aloud. I have vacation time accumulated. Sarah can take a week off from classes. We tell everyone we're visiting my sister in Phoenix. But instead, you go somewhere unexpected, Ghost concluded, warming to the plan. Somewhere only the three of us know about. The strategy was taking shape, a collaboration between three minds connected by blood and circumstance. For the first time that night, a sense of possibility replaced the oppressive weight of threat. I know a place, Ghost said. A cabin about 2 hours north of here. Belongs to a Marine buddy of mine. Remote defensible off any grid Viper might access. Catherine nodded slowly. We stage the argument tomorrow morning at the diner. Make it public, make it convincing. I storm out, ride north with my brothers, circle back after dark, Ghost continued. You two pack casually mention Phoenix to neighbors, then head in the opposite direction. Sarah watched her parents building on each other's ideas, the natural synchronicity between them emerging despite the years and hurt that separated them. There was something powerful in witnessing this connection, this evidence that some bonds transcended time and distance. We meet at the cabin, Sarah added. Lay low until the FBI is ready to move on Viper. Ghost reached for his phone. I need to call Harrison, bring him into the loop without revealing too much about our plan. As he stepped onto the back porch to make the call, Catherine and Sarah exchanged glances. You okay? Catherine asked her daughter softly. Sarah's smile was wry. Shouldn't I be asking you that? The love of your young life just reappeared after 17 years, bringing a motorcycle gang war with him. Catherine's expression softened. He wasn't always what you saw tonight. Before the club took over his life, Jack was different, gentler. Loss, yes, but with such capacity for goodness. Do you still love him? Sarah asked directly. Catherine looked toward the back door where Ghost's silhouette was visible through the curtain. I never stopped loving the man I knew. The question is whether that man still exists beneath all those layers of Jack the Ghost Reynolds. Sarah considered this. I think he does. I see glimpses of him. When he talks about you, when he looks at those pictures on the wall, there's something genuine there. Genuine doesn't mean safe, Catherine cautioned, or reliable. But it's a start, Sarah replied. After 17 years of nothing, it's something. Their conversation was interrupted by Ghost's return. His expression was grim but determined. Harrison's on board. The FBI will be ready to move on Viper in 3 days, 4 at the most. They're expediting warrants based on the evidence they already have. And he's okay with us disappearing until then? Catherine asked skeptically. Ghost's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I might have neglected to share the specifics of our plan. Just told him you two would be unreachable for a few days, and I'd be maintaining a low profile. Plausible deniability, Sarah noted with unexpected approval. Exactly, Ghost confirmed. Less he knows officially, the better. The three spent the next hour refining their strategy, addressing contingencies, establishing communication protocols. Ghost was impressed by Catherine's tactical thinking and Sarah's quick problem-solving. They were formidable women, these two, who shared his blood. We should get some sleep, Catherine suggested eventually. Tomorrow's going to be challenging. She showed Ghost to the small guest room, providing towels and basic toiletries with the efficient hospitality of a woman accustomed to self-sufficiency. The room was sparsely furnished but comfortable, dominated by a bookshelf filled with nursing reference texts. Sarah studies in here sometimes, Catherine explained, when she needs quiet. Ghost nodded, acutely aware of standing in a home built on his absence, in a life carefully constructed without him. Thank you, Catherine. Not just for the room, for everything. She paused in the doorway, studying him with eyes that had once known every expression on his face. Don't thank me yet, Jack. We're not out of this. We will be, he promised. I won't let anything happen to either of you. Catherine's smile was sad. Some things already have, but we'll do our best with what's left. After she left, Ghost sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the day pressing down on him. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph of Sarah at her high school graduation, radiant in cap and gown, Catherine beaming beside her. A moment he should have shared, a milestone he had missed. He picked up the photo, tracing his daughter's smile with a calloused finger. The ghosts of what may have been crowded around him in the quiet room. Birthdays, uncelebrated school plays, unattended, father-daughter dances never experienced. 17 years of absence concentrated in a single frame of presence. Ghost replaced the photo carefully, then removed the small silver cross from his cut. He held it in his palm, a talisman against the darkness he had carried for so long. The prison chaplain who had given it to him would have called this moment providence, not coincidence. A divine orchestration bringing him back to the family he had lost, offering a chance for redemption. Ghost wasn't sure he believed in such things, but tonight he wanted to. He wanted to believe that the broken pieces of his life could still form something worthwhile, something honorable. He wanted to believe he could be the man Catherine had once loved, the father Sarah deserved. He placed the cross on the nightstand and prepared for whatever rest might come. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains. Ghost woke instantly, alert, years of life on the road having trained him to orient quickly in new surroundings. For a moment, the domestic sounds filtering through the house, coffee brewing, shower running, radio playing softly, seemed to belong to another life, another man. He dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, splashed water on his face, and followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen. Catherine was there already in her nurse's uniform, preparing a quick breakfast. The normalcy of the scene struck him anew, this glimpse of the life that had continued without him. "Sleep okay?" she asked, pushing a mug of coffee toward him. "Better than expected," Ghost replied truthfully. Sarah joined them minutes later, damp hair pulled back, dressed for her waitressing shift at the diner. The three ate breakfast together, reviewing the details of their plan in between bites of toast and sips of coffee. The domestic tableau was surreal in its ordinariness. Three people sharing breakfast like any family while planning to outwit a dangerous criminal. "Remember," Ghost cautioned as they prepared to leave, "the argument has to look real. Viper might have people watching the diner already." "I was a theater kid in high school," Sarah assured him. "I can handle a public scene." Catherine's smile was knowing. "And I have 17 years of things I've wanted to say to your father. Making it convincing won't be a problem." Ghost winced slightly at that, but nodded his acceptance. "My brothers will be outside the diner. Once I storm out, they'll follow. We'll make it clear we're leaving town heading north." They left in separate vehicles, Ghost on his Harley, Catherine and Sarah in Catherine's car. The morning air was crisp, the town beginning to stir with daily routines. Ghost felt exposed on his motorcycle, hyper-aware of potential observers. Viper was methodical, patient. He would have people watching, waiting. The Rusty Spoke diner was half full when they arrived, the breakfast crowd nursing coffees and reading newspapers. Sarah entered first, donning her apron and clocking in as if it were any normal morning. Catherine followed shortly after, taking a booth by the window. Ghost gave them 15 minutes before making his entrance, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. Conversations paused, heads turned. Ghost's reputation in the previous night's events had clearly made the rounds of small-town gossip. He ignored the stares scanning the diner with practiced casualness while noting two unfamiliar men at the counter, possible watchers for Viper. Ghost took the seat opposite Catherine, his back to the wall, facing the door as always. Sarah approached their table, order pad in hand, her expression professionally neutral. "Coffee?" she asked loudly enough to be overheard. "Black," Ghost replied. The staging was set. Now came the performance. Catherine waited until Sarah had served the coffee and moved to another table. "You need to leave," she said, her voice carrying just enough to attract attention without being more obvious. "Last night was a mistake." Ghost played his part, leaning forward intensely. 17 years, Catherine. You owe me more than one night's conversation." "I don't owe you anything," Catherine responded. Authentic anger bleeding into her performance. "You made your choices. I made mine." The diner had grown quieter, patrons pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. The two men at the counter had stopped eating, their attention fixed on the unfolding drama. "She's my daughter too," Ghost insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I have rights." "Rights?" Catherine's laugh was bitter, not entirely feigned. "Where were those rights when she was learning to walk? When she had the flu at 3 and cried all night? When she needed braces, college tuition, a father at her graduation?" The raw emotion in her voice caught Ghost off guard. This was no longer entirely an act. Catherine was giving voice to years of solitary struggle, of doing it all alone while he lived free on the road. I didn't know, Ghost said, genuine regret coloring his tone. If I had known, you would have done what Catherine challenged, changing the wording from their previous conversation to avoid exact repetition. Given up your precious freedom, your brotherhood, the life you chose over everything else. The question cut deep, echoing their private conversations from the night before. Around them, the diner was completely silent, now witnesses to what appeared to be 17 years of pain cracking open in public. Sarah approached the table again, her expression strained. Mom, people are staring, she said exactly as planned. Maybe you should continue this somewhere else. There's nothing to continue, Catherine declared, gathering her purse. He needs to leave, go back to his club, his life on the road. We've done fine without him for 17 years. We'll do fine for 17 more. Ghost stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. Is that what you want, Sarah, for me to disappear again? Sarah hesitated, her eyes meeting his briefly. A flicker of genuine emotion passed between them. Regret for the charade, understanding of its necessity. I think Mom's right, she said finally, her voice steady despite the lie. So, this is too much, too fast. We need space. Ghost's expression hardened convincingly. Fine, I know when I'm not wanted. He threw some bills on the table for the coffee. I'll be out of your lives by noon, back on the road where I belong. With that, he stormed toward the door, his exit perfectly calibrated for maximum dramatic effect. The bell jangled violently as the door slammed behind him. Through the window, patrons could see him mount his motorcycle gun, the engine with unnecessary force, and peel out of the parking lot in a spray of gravel. Two Hell's Defenders fell in behind him, the thunder of their combined engines fading as they headed north out of town. The diner slowly resumed its normal rhythm, buzzing with fresh gossip. At the counter, the two unfamiliar men exchanged glances, one of them slipping outside to make a phone call. Catherine sat back down, her hands trembling slightly from the emotional exertion. Sarah refilled her coffee cup, murmuring under her breath, "That was intense, Lo." "Too convincing," Catherine asked quietly. Sarah shook her head slightly. "Perfect. I saw one of them calling someone outside. They bought it." Catherine sipped her coffee, her expression composed despite the emotional toll of the performance. "Now we wait. You finish your shift, I'll go to work as normal. We pack tonight, tell the neighbors about visiting my sister, and leave at dawn tomorrow." The plan was in motion. The first act of their dangerous play had gone exactly as scripted. Now came the waiting, the pretense of normalcy while the clock ticked down toward their escape. Sarah continued her shift, smiling and taking orders as if her world hadn't been turned upside down in the past 24 hours. Catherine left for her shift at Pinecrest, stopping to check on Frank and update him discreetly on their plans. "Be careful, Catherine," the old veteran warned. "Men like Viper don't give up easily." "We will be," Catherine promised. "And when this is over," Frank's eyes were knowing, "you'll have decisions to make about the future, about Jack." Catherine squeezed his hand. "One crisis at a time, Frank." What neither of them noticed was the orderly pausing outside Frank's doorway, listening intently to their conversation. He was new hire just 2 weeks ago. No one at Pinecrest knew he was Viper's nephew, placed there specifically to monitor Catherine's movements. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Catherine went through her nursing duties mechanically, her mind divided between caring for her patients and watching for any sign of Viper or his men. Sarah finished her shift at the diner, making casual mention to coworkers about her mother's sister in Phoenix, laying groundwork for their cover story. By nightfall, no suspicious activity had been reported by either of them. Ghost brothers maintaining discreet surveillance on Catherine's house confirmed no unusual vehicles or individuals in the area. The performance at the diner seemed to have achieved its purpose. Shortly after midnight, a dark figure slipped over Catherine's back fence, moving with silent efficiency toward the house. The security light activated, illuminating Ghost as he used the key Catherine had provided to enter through the back door. Inside, Catherine and Sarah were waiting, bags-packed expressions tense with anticipation. "Any trouble?" Catherine asked immediately. Ghost shook his head. "Clean. My brothers and I made a show of heading north, then split up. I doubled back through logging roads off the main highways. No tail. Our neighbors think we're leaving for Phoenix in the morning," Sarah reported. "I even asked Mrs. Henderson to water my plants." Ghost nodded approval. "Good. We leave at dawn, separate vehicles. I've mapped a route to the cabin that avoids main roads. No cell service up there, but there's a landline for emergencies." The three of them reviewed final details, triple-checking their preparations. When everything was confirmed, they settled in for a few hours of rest before their pre-dawn departure. In the dimness of the living room, Ghost found himself alone with Catherine while Sarah showered. The silence between them was charged with unspoken histories, with questions neither was ready to ask. "Thank you," Ghost said finally, "for trusting me with this." With her. Catherine's expression was complicated, layered with emotions too nuanced for simple categorization. "I'm not sure it's trust yet, Jack. Necessity, maybe. Hope, possibly." "I'll take hope," Ghost replied softly. "It's more than I deserve." Catherine studied him in the low light, seeing echoes of the young Marine she had fallen in love with, glimpses of the man who might have been if life had taken different turns. "When this is over," she said, "when Sarah is safe, we should talk. Really talk about everything." Ghost nodded, understanding the significance of the offer. "I'd like that." The moment was interrupted by Sarah's return. The three of them moved through final preparations, like a team that had worked together for years rather than hours, each anticipating the other's needs, filling gaps without discussion. As dawn approached, they stood together in Catherine's kitchen, three individuals connected by blood and circumstance, about to embark on a journey whose end none could predict with certainty. "Ready?" Ghost asked, looking between the two women who were in different ways the center of his universe. Catherine nodded, her nurse's bag packed with medical supplies alongside her clothing. "Ready." Sarah shouldered her backpack, her young face set with determination that mirrored her father's. "Let's go." They moved toward the door, toward the uncertain future that awaited them beyond Catherine's carefully constructed sanctuary. Whatever happened in the days to come, their lives had already been irrevocably altered by Ghost's return. The first rays of sunrise painted the eastern sky as three vehicles, a motorcycle, and two cars pulled away from the quiet house on Oak Street, heading in different directions, before converging on a remote mountain road that would lead them to temporary sanctuary. Behind them, Stillwater stirred to another ordinary day, unaware of the extraordinary drama unfolding at its edges. But at Pinecrest Nursing Home, the new orderly was already on the phone delivering news to a man whose patience had just run out. "They're gone, Uncle Victor. All of them, and they're not heading to Phoenix like they told everyone." The cabin perched on the edge of a forested ridge, its weathered logs blending with the surrounding pines. A small clearing offered views of the valley below, while the dense woods behind provided cover and escape routes if needed. Ghost had chosen the location well secluded without being isolated, defensible without being obvious. Catherine and Sarah arrived first, following Ghost's detailed directions up a winding dirt road that didn't appear on most maps. They parked behind the cabin, out of sight from below, and waited anxiously for Ghost to join them. When his motorcycle finally rumbled up the path an hour later, Sarah felt a relief she hadn't expected. In just 2 days, this stranger who was her father had somehow become someone whose safety mattered to her. "All clear," Ghost reported as he dismounted. "No signs of surveillance or pursuit. My brothers are maintaining a perimeter around Stillwater, watching Viper's crew. So far, they're buying our performance." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, and a bathroom with a shower that required heating water on the old wood stove. It smelled of pine resin and wood smoke, a masculine space softened by time. "My buddy comes up here for hunting," Ghost explained, stowing his gear. "Not much, but it's secure. No one knows about this place except him and me. And now you two." They settled into an uneasy rhythm over the next few days, 3 people learning to navigate shared space and unexpected intimacy. Ghost maintained regular contact with his brothers and Agent Harrison via the cabin's landline, careful to keep the calls brief to avoid potential tracing. The news was cautiously optimistic. Viper's crew appeared to believe Ghost had left town, and the FBI was closing in on the final evidence needed for their case. Sarah found herself watching her parents, these 2 strangers, who had created her as they moved around each other, with the careful distance of former lovers, who still remembered each other's habits. She caught the way Ghost's eyes followed Catherine when she wasn't looking, the way Catherine would sometimes pause mid-motion when Ghost entered a room, as if her body remembered his presence before her mind could catch up. On the 3rd morning, Sarah woke early to find Ghost on the cabin's porch, cleaning a hunting rifle with methodical precision. "There are more weapons," he said without looking up as she joined him, "under the floorboards in the main room, just in case." You think we'll need them? Sarah asked, wrapping her sweater tighter against the morning chill. Hope not, but hope isn't a strategy. Ghost's hands moved with practiced efficiency across the gun's components. Your mother know how to shoot. She never said. We never had guns at home. Ghost nodded. I'll teach you both today. Just the basics. Sarah studied his profile so much like her own. You've been preparing for something like this your whole life, haven't you? Always ready for the fight. Ghost's hands stilled. Marines teach you to expect the worst, hope for the best. Life in the club reinforced that. He reassembled the rifle with quick, sure movements. But this is different, Ed. This isn't just about survival. It's about protecting what matters. Us, Sarah said simply. Ghost met her eyes, then his expression stripped of its usual guardedness. Family's not just blood. It's a choice, one I didn't get to make 17 years ago. And now I choose you and your mother over everything. He looked out at the forest. Even if that's all I get to do before this is over. The fatalistic note in his voice alarmed Sarah. What do you mean? Before Ghost could answer, the cabin door opened and Catherine emerged with a pot of coffee and 3 mugs. Planning the day's survival training, she asked, her tone light but her eyes serious as they took in the rifle. Jack was just explaining why we should learn to shoot, Sarah said, using his real name, deliberately watching something flicker in both her parents' expressions at the sound of it. Catherine poured the coffee, handing mugs to each of them. You know I never told you this, Sarah, but I actually know how to handle a gun. Your father taught me back when we were together. Ghost looked up, surprise evident on his face. You remember that? Some things you don't forget, Catherine replied, her eyes meeting his over her coffee cup. Like the day you taught me to shoot your Colt Python at that quarry outside Tucson. I hit 9 out of 10 targets. A slow smile spread across Ghost's face, one that seemed to shed years from his weathered features. 10 out of 10. You're misremembering. Best natural shot I ever saw. For a moment, they were lost in shared memory, a private moment from a shared past that Sarah could only glimpse. Then Catherine's smile faded as she looked at the rifle. I hope we won't need these skills. So do I, Ghost agreed. But Harrison says the takedown is still at least a day away. Until then, we prepare for anything. The rest of the morning was spent in basic weapons training, Ghost patiently instructing Sarah in handling, loading, and firing the rifle and a smaller handgun. Catherine needed only a refresher, her body remembering the stance and grip with surprising ease. They practiced away from the cabin in a small ravine where the sound would be partially contained. By afternoon, Sarah's shoulders ached and her ears rang despite the protective gear Ghost had insisted upon. But she felt a grim satisfaction in her improving accuracy and knowing she could defend herself if necessary. They returned to the cabin to find the landline ringing. Ghost answered, his expression darkening as he listened to the voice on the other end. When, he demanded. How many are you sure? After a tense pause, he nodded grimly. Keep on them. I'll call Harrison. He hung up and turned to Catherine and Sarah, his face set in hard lines. They found us. One of Viper's men was spotted asking questions in the town at the bottom of the mountain. Showing pictures. Catherine paled. How we were so careful. Frank, Sarah breathed suddenly. Mom, you told Frank our real plans. What if someone overheard? Ghost was already dialing another number. Harrison, it's Ghost. Cover's blown. Viper's men are in the vicinity. He listened briefly. How soon can you move? We may not have that long. The tension in his jaw told them everything they needed to know. He hung up and immediately began checking weapons, moving with focused urgency. Harrison says they're close, but need another 12 hours to get all the warrants and manpower in place for a clean operation, Ghost reported. We need to hold out until then. My brothers are on their way, but they're at least 2 hours out. Catherine moved to the windows, checking sight lines and vulnerabilities. How many men does Viper have? According to my VP, he traveled light. 3, maybe 4 guys with him. He doesn't want to attract attention. So it's 3 of us against 4 of them, Sarah calculated, plus your brothers when they arrive. No, Ghost corrected. It's me against them. You 2 take the Jeep parked behind the woodshed. There's a fire road that connects to the highway about 5 miles east. Harrison will have agents meet you halfway. Catherine's eyes flashed with the same fire Sarah had seen when patients were threatened at the nursing home. We're not leaving you here alone, Jack. This isn't a debate, Ghost insisted, checking ammunition. I brought this danger to you. I'll handle it. And what happens when they kill you and come after us anyway? Catherine challenged. 4 against 1 are terrible odds, even for the great Ghost Reynolds. Sarah watched them face off, the same stubborn determination mirrored in both their expressions. In that moment, she could see exactly why they had loved each other once, and exactly why that love had fractured under the weight of their mutual stubbornness. She's right, Sarah interjected. We stand a better chance together. You taught us to shoot for a reason. Ghost looked between them, frustration warring with pride in his expression. Before he could respond, the distant sound of motorcycle engines echoed up from the valley. Too soon to be my brothers, Ghost murmured, moving to the window. They're coming up the main road. Bold. Catherine joined him, peering cautiously through the curtains. 4 bikes, like you said. They don't know we're aware of them yet, Ghost reasoned. That gives us an advantage. We need to move now, set up positions. For the next 15 minutes, they transformed the cabin and its surroundings into a defensive position. Ghost directed them with calm efficiency, placing them where they'd have cover and clear fields of fire, but wouldn't be easily spotted. Catherine took position upstairs with the rifle covering the approach to the cabin. Sarah was stationed on the ground floor at a window with a view of the clearing. Ghost would be outside using the terrain to create ambush points. Remember, Ghost told them before moving into position, these aren't weekend warriors. They're experienced and they're ruthless. Don't hesitate if you have a shot. Catherine checked her rifle one last time. We won't. Ghost turned to go, then paused. With deliberate movements, he removed the silver cross pin from his cut and handed it to Sarah. Hold on to this, he said simply. I'll want it back when this is over. Sarah closed her fingers around the small piece of metal warm from his body heat. Be careful out there. Always am. Ghost's smile held a confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked at Catherine one last time, a world of unspoken emotion passing between them, then slipped out the back door. The waiting was agonizing. Sarah could hear the motorcycles growing louder as they approached, then stopping some distance away. She strained to listen for any sound of Ghost, but he moved like his namesake, silent and invisible among the trees. The first shot came without warning, a sharp crack that echoed across the clearing. A man's shout of pain followed. Then everything erupted at once, gunfire shouting the crash of someone moving through underbrush. I see 2 of them, Catherine called from upstairs, moving toward the west side of the cabin. Sarah adjusted her position, heart pounding in her ears. Through her window, she caught movement, a flash of leather, a gun raised. She fired without thinking, the recoil jolting through her shoulder. The figure dropped, whether hit or just taking cover, she couldn't tell. Outside, the firefight intensified. Ghost was using hit-and-run tactics, firing from one position, then moving quickly to another, creating the impression of multiple defenders. But Viper's men were advancing steadily, working their way closer to the cabin. A burst of gunfire shattered the window beside Sarah, sending her diving to the floor as glass rained down. She scrambled to a new position, heart-racing, hands trembling on her weapon. Sarah, Catherine's voice came from upstairs. Are you hit? I'm okay, Sarah called back, moving to another window. They're getting closer. Through a gap in the curtains, Sarah spotted a figure breaking cover, running for the cabin's front door. She fired twice, missing, but forcing him back into the trees. The momentary victory was short-lived. A deafening crash from the rear of the cabin told them someone had breached the back entrance. Catherine's rifle barked twice from upstairs, followed by the heavy thud of a body falling. One down, Catherine shouted. But Sarah could hear footsteps moving through the kitchen, now someone inside the cabin. She retreated to the hallway, using the corner for cover, weapon trained on the kitchen doorway. A shadow appeared, then a gun barrel. Sarah fired just as the intruder did. His shot went wide, splintering the wall beside her head. Hers found its mark, a cry of pain, a gun clattering to the floor. The man staggered into view, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, heart hammering against her ribs. Don't move, she ordered, surprised at the steadiness in her voice. Outside, the shooting had momentarily stopped. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear the wounded man's labored breathing, Catherine moving cautiously on the floor above, and more distantly, the rumble of motorcycle engines. Different engines approaching fast. Sarah, Ghost's voice called from outside. Catherine, in here, Sarah called back, never taking her eyes off the wounded intruder. We're okay, one inside wounded. Ghost appeared in the doorway, his cut torn and bloodied along one arm but otherwise intact. He took in the situation with a quick glance, moving to secure the wounded man's weapon. "Reinforcements just arrived," he reported. "My brothers. Viper." "Haven't seen him," Sarah replied, the adrenaline finally starting to ebb, leaving her shaky. Catherine descended the stairs, rifle still at the ready. "There was another one upstairs. He won't be a problem anymore." Her voice was clinical, professional, but her face was ashen. Ghost secured the wounded man with zip ties, then quickly checked both women for injuries. Satisfied they were unharmed, he moved to the window, watching as three Hell's Defenders motorcycles pulled up outside. "We need to get you two out of here," Ghost said, turning back to them. "Viper's still out there somewhere. My brothers will escort you to the meeting point with Harrison's agents." "What about you?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm finishing this," Ghost replied, his voice flat. "One way or another." "No," Catherine said firmly. "We're not splitting up now. Harrison's team will be here soon. We just need to hold out a little longer." Ghost's expression hardened. "Viper won't stop coming. Not as long as I'm alive. This ends today. Then we face him to Gishar," Sarah insisted. "Family, remember." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Ghost looked at his daughter, this young woman who had his determination and her mother's compassion, who had just fought for her life with a courage he could only admire. "Family," he agreed finally. "But we do this smart, no unnecessary risks." They conferred quickly with Ghost brothers, formulating a plan to secure the cabin and surrounding area. The wounded Hell's Rage member was secured in one of the bedrooms, guarded by one of Ghost's men. The others took up defensive positions outside, establishing a perimeter. "Viper's likely retreated to regroup," Ghost reasoned. "He won't give up, but he'll be more cautious now." Catherine tended to Ghost's wounded arm, her nurse's training taking over. "Not too deep," she assessed, cleaning and bandaging the gash. "But it needs stitches eventually." "Had worse," Ghost replied, though he didn't pull away from her touch. Sarah watched them, this careful dance of proximity and distance, of professional care and personal concern. She wondered if they even realized how naturally they fell back into sync with each other, despite everything. The landline rang, startling all of them. Ghost answered cautiously, listening for a moment before his expression changed to grim satisfaction. "Harrison and his team are 20 minutes out," he reported after hanging up. "Full tactical unit. They've got arrest warrants for Viper and all his known associates. It's almost over." Catherine exhaled slowly. 20 minutes is a long time when someone's hunting you. "We've got good men watching the approaches," Ghost assured her. "And we've already handled most of Viper's crew. He's alone now, or nearly so." Sarah moved to the window, scanning the tree line. "I don't think he'll wait for the FBI to arrive. He seems like the type to make one last desperate move." Ghost nodded. "That's exactly what worries me. A cornered Viper is the most dangerous kind." They didn't have to wait long to be proven right. The attack came not with gunfire or a frontal assault, but with the acrid smell of smoke drifting through the cabin windows. "Fire," Catherine realized, first moving to the back of the cabin. "He's trying to smoke us out." Through the windows, they could see flames beginning to lick up the dry brush at the edge of the clearing, moving quickly toward the cabin in the light breeze. One of Ghost's brothers was already trying to contain it, but the fire was spreading too fast. "We need to get out now," Ghost ordered, gathering their essential gear. "Head for the vehicles." They moved swiftly, Sarah and Catherine taking the rear exit while Ghost coordinated with his brothers. Outside, the smoke was thickening, reducing visibility and making each breath a struggle. They hurried toward the Jeep parked behind the woodshed, staying low and using the building for cover. They were halfway there when a figure emerged from the smoke behind them. Viper, his face contorted with hatred, a gun leveled at Catherine's back. "Ghost," he shouted, "watch her die, just like I had to watch my brother die because of you." Everything happened in a blur of motion. Ghost 20 feet away, spinning at the sound. Sarah seeing the gun, shoving her mother aside. The deafening crack of a gunshot. And then Ghost launching himself at Viper, both men crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. Sarah scrambled to her mother, relieved to find her unharmed. They turned to see Ghost and Viper locked in a brutal struggle, rolling through dirt and ash, each fighting for control of Viper's weapon. Ghost was stronger, but Viper fought with the desperation of a man with nothing to lose. The gun discharged once into the ground, then again into the air. Ghost managed to slam Viper's wrist against a rock, finally dislodging the weapon. But Viper produced a knife from his boot, slashing wildly, catching Ghost across the chest. Ghost recoiled, giving Viper just enough space to scramble for his fallen gun. He seized it, swinging it toward Ghost with murderous intent. Two shots rang out simultaneously. Viper jerked, then collapsed, blood blooming across his chest. Behind him stood Catherine, Ghost's handgun, steady in her hands, her face a mask of cold determination. "Like I said," she told the dying man, "some things you don't forget." Viper's eyes went wide with shock, then dimmed as his last breath rattled from his lungs. Catherine immediately dropped the gun and rushed to Ghost, who had slumped against a tree hand, pressed to his bleeding chest. "Not too deep," he assured her, grimacing. "Just hurts like hell." Sarah joined them, helping Catherine examine the wound. "Sirens," she said, hearing the distant wail approaching up the mountain road. "Harrison's team is almost here." Ghost nodded, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. "Told you we'd make it." Catherine's professional composure finally cracked, tears tracking through the soot on her cheeks. "You nearly didn't, you stubborn fool." Ghost reached up, brushing a tear away with his thumb. "But I had you two watching my back. Best odds I've ever had." The wail of sirens grew louder as FBI vehicles began arriving, agents in tactical gear securing the scene. Agent Harrison, a square-jawed man in his 40s, approached them as medics attended to Ghost's injuries. "Looks like you started the party without us, Reynolds," he observed, surveying the aftermath. "Didn't have much choice," Ghost replied. "Viper wasn't the patient type." Harrison nodded to Catherine and Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell, Miss Mitchell, you're safe now. We've got Viper's entire operation in custody across 3 states. Simultaneous raids. It's over." Ghost looked up sharply. "All of it. The weapons dealers, the distributors." "All of it," Harrison confirmed. "Your intel was the key. The case is solid." The tension that had been a constant in Ghost's body for months, perhaps years, seemed to drain away. He leaned back, allowing the medics to finish bandaging his chest. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, looking between Ghost and Harrison. "Your father fulfilled his end of our arrangement," Harrison said. "Full immunity as promised. He's a free man." He looked at Ghost. "Though I'd suggest finding a less hazardous line of work going forward." As Harrison moved away to coordinate with his team, Catherine knelt beside Ghost. "A free man," she repeated. "What will you do with that freedom?" Ghost looked from Catherine to Sarah, then back again. "That depends." "On what?" Catherine asked. "On whether second chances are really possible," Ghost replied softly. "On whether two people who lost 17 years can find their way back to each other. On whether a man can earn the right to be a father after missing everything that mattered." Catherine took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I think that's a journey we'll have to take one day at a time." Sarah joined them, completing the circle. "Family's not just blood," she echoed Ghost's earlier words. "It's a choice one we all get to make now." Ghost nodded, emotion rendering him momentarily speechless. He reached into his pocket, producing the silver crosspin that Sarah had returned to him just before the final confrontation. "I've carried this as a reminder of the man I was trying to become," he said, holding it in his palm. "Maybe now it can be a symbol of the man I am, the man I want to be for both of you." As the sun began to set over the mountain ridge, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, 3 people who had been strangers days ago sat together in the growing darkness, connected by blood, bound by choice, facing an uncertain but shared future. The road ahead would not be easy. There were wounds still to heal, trust still to rebuild, relationships still to define. But for the first time in 17 years, they would travel it together. 1 year later, the converted warehouse on the edge of Tucson hummed with activity. "Second Chance Veterans Center" read the sign above the entrance, freshly painted in bold letters. Inside, a dozen former service members gathered around tables, some working on job applications, others engaged in group therapy, all finding a place where they understood and were understood. Sarah moved between the tables, her nursing credentials now complete, offering both medical assistance and the kind of compassionate presence her mother had taught her. At 26, she carried herself with a confidence born of having faced the worst and survived. In the office at the back, Ghost, now simply Jack Reynolds, again sat across from Agent Harrison, finalizing paperwork for a federal grant to expand the center's services. "The Bureau's impressed with what you've built here," Harrison commented, signing the last form. 3 centers in a year. Over 100 vets helped back to civilian life. Jack shrugged the gesture reminiscent of his ghost days, though the hardened edges had softened. Had good examples of what second chances can look like. Figured others deserved the same shot. Harrison stood to leave, pausing at the door. By the way, your request for the Hell's Defenders to participate in the Veterans Motorcycle Therapy Program approved. Keep them on the right side of the law, Reynolds. Always do now, Jack promised, rising to shake Harrison's hand. As the agent left, Catherine entered, still in her hospital scrubs after finishing her shift at Tucson General. At 46, she remained beautiful, though the past year had etched new lines around her eyes, these from laughter rather than worry. Harrison seemed pleased, she observed, moving to Jack's side. Federal funding secured for another year, he confirmed, plus approval for the motorcycle therapy program. Catherine smiled, leaning into him as his arms circled her waist. Frank would be proud. Jack nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his features. The old veteran had passed away peacefully 3 months after the confrontation with Viper, living just long enough to see Catherine and Jack remarry in a simple ceremony at Pinecrest. His military flag now hung in a place of honor at the center. He'd love what Sarah's doing with the medical outreach program, Jack agreed. They watched through the office window as their daughter guided a young veteran with a prosthetic leg through stretching exercises. Her face animated as she explained the benefits of each movement. Sometimes I still can't believe we got here, Catherine said softly. After everything. Jack's hand found hers, their matching wedding bands catching the light. Every day I wake up expecting it all to be a dream. The center, Sarah, you. Not a dream, Catherine assured him. Just a very long detour to where we were always meant to be. Outside in the main room, Sarah glanced up, catching sight of her parents through the office window. The simple tableau, her father and mother standing together, hands linked, watching over the community they'd built, filled her with a quiet joy she'd never expected to find. The black rose tattoo on her own forearm, freshly inked for her birthday, carried a new meaning now. Not of chains broken by loss, but of bonds renewed by choice. A family fractured by time, reunited by fate, strengthened by forgiveness. A second chance blooming from the ashes of the first.